All right, today we are diving into something huge, how to really tackle the major obstacles in our lives. We're going to unpack a classic Buddhist teaching that completely reframes how we look at our struggles. It's pretty powerful stuff, so let's get right into it.
Let me ask you this. What if all those things holding you back, the frustrations, the failures, those deep issues that just won't go away, what if they aren't just random bad luck? What if they're actually symptoms of an underlying illness? Just shifting your perspective to that one idea, that is the key to everything we're about to talk about.
And this quote, it basically lays out the entire game plan for us. It's such a powerful metaphor, right? If life's problems are a sickness, well, then the teachings, the Dharma, are the specific medicine you need to get better. The only catch is, we have to be willing to see ourselves as the patient and, actually start the diagnosis.
Okay, so if we're running with that metaphor, our first job is to act like a doctor. I mean, you can't find a cure until you figure out what the disease is, right? So it's time to look inward and diagnose the sickness.
So what this teaching tells us is that almost all of our suffering, all of our setbacks, they can be traced back to what are called the three obstacles. You can think of these as three major categories of illness that just get in our way and stop us in our tracks.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What exactly are these three great obstacles? Breaking them down is the very first step to finding the right medicine for whatever's holding you back.
And what's so cool here is how clearly this teaching lays out the diagnosis. Okay, first up, you have the affliction obstacle. These are basically the poisons inside of us. Things like greed, anger, pride, or that nagging self-doubt. They just wreck our inner peace. Second is the karma obstacle. This one is that feeling of spinning your wheels. You're trying to do something, but you always seem to fail. You see other people getting ahead, and you're just stuck. And finally, you've got the retribution obstacle. This is simply the situation you're in right now, the direct result of past actions. It's your current life circumstances, whether you're rich or poor, healthy or sick.
So maybe you look at that list and you identify one of these obstacles in your own life. But what if it feels impossibly big? I mean, what if it feels like you're surrounded by a wall that's 10 meters thick and 100 meters high? How on earth do you even begin to take something like that down?
Well, to answer a question that big, we need a really extreme story. And that brings us to a famous figure named Milarepa, a man who faced a karmic wall so massive, so unbelievably huge, that it seemed truly, completely insurmountable.
Let's just run through his backstory real quick. Milarepa started out with a pretty good life, born into a wealthy family, but then tragedy struck. His parents died, and his own relatives stole his inheritance and kicked him and his mother to the curb. Filled with this burning hatred, he went looking for revenge. He actually learned black magic and unleashed this giant hailstorm that killed a whole lot of people, creating a karmic debt that is almost impossible to imagine.
And I really want to be crystal clear about the scale of this. His karma obstacle wasn't just big. It was considered so severe that any kind of spiritual progress, let alone enlightenment, should have been completely impossible for him. For all intents and purposes, his wall was unbreakable.
And this is where the story takes a really wild turn. His teacher, a master named Marpa, gave him a prescription, a cure for his sickness that honestly looked a lot more like a punishment.
I mean, just look at this process. It's kind of insane. Marpa tells Milarepa, "Go build me a stone house, by yourself." So Milarepa spends months doing this back-breaking labor. He finally finishes, and Marpa just looks at it and says, "Nope, this is all wrong." Then he orders him to tear the whole thing down, stone by stone, and carry every single piece back to where he found it. And then he made him do it all over again and again on different mountains.
So, what in the world was the point of all this? It seems so cruel, right? Well, the physical work was actually a metaphor. Marpa was teaching him something incredibly profound. If you've built a wrong house, a life based on terrible actions, you can't just put a new coat of paint on it. The only real way to fix it is to tear it down to the foundation. Every single stone Milarepa moved and then returned was like a piece of his negative karma being physically deconstructed and purified.
Okay, so that is an incredible story. But what does a guy building and demolishing stone huts hundreds of years ago have to do with you and me, right here, right now? Let's bring it back to our own lives.
This slide puts everything into perspective. The story essentially leaves us with a really pointed question. He could break such a huge karmic obstacle. Have you killed that many people? Now, the point isn't to make our struggles seem small. It's to show us that if a wall that massive could be demolished, then our own walls,
the ones built from our own mistakes, our own regrets, and setbacks, they are absolutely 100% surmountable.
So this story basically gives us a blueprint. First, you got to recognize the sickness. Is it an internal affliction, a karmic block, a consequence you're living with? Second, find the medicine, the wisdom and tools in the teachings. Third, and this is the hard part, you have to do the work. It's not going to be easy. Just like Milarepa, it takes real commitment. You have to tear down the bad stuff at its root, not just patch it over. And then and only then can you start to rebuild correctly on a new, positive foundation.
And here's one last really important thing the source emphasizes. You don't have to invent this process from scratch. You don't have to figure it all out alone. The blueprints already exist. Real understanding, real progress, comes from studying these classic stories in scriptures. They show you the proven methods that others have used to successfully demolish their own walls. So we'll leave you with this question. Milarepa had to see his wall before he could do anything about it. The diagnosis always comes before the cure. So looking at your own life right now, what are the walls? What are the afflictions, the blocks, the consequences that are standing in your way? Because just identifying them, that is the first and most powerful step you can possibly take.